Bell Hollow, Ohio, always smells like gunpowder and hot asphalt by the 3rd of July. The town dresses itself early. Rows of red, white, and blue paper garlands sagging between light poles, faded flags in every storefront. The scent of barbecue fat mixing with diesel from the parade tractors. I should love it. I teach history for a living. My name's Evan Cole, and for 11 years I've organized this parade, the pride of a county that hasn't had much else to brag about since the mine closed. We call it the Walk of Patriots. Folks drive in from 3 counties to watch. Same route, same starting time, same smiles. Tradition is all Bell Hollow has left. At dusk, the high school band rehearses on Main Street, their drums echoing between brick facades. Behind them, the War Memorial catches the last light, bronze soldiers gilded in sunset. It's beautiful in the tired way old things are. Still, the elders insist on an older tradition, a private practice march at 4 a.m. before the fireworks crowd arrives. Keeps the rhythm right, Mayor Schultz always says. He never attends. Only the veterans watch that rehearsal, parked on folding chairs beside the cemetery gate. I've always wondered who they're waiting for, until this year. Every town invents a legend to glue itself together, and Bellfallow's glue smells like gun smoke. People here say that after the Civil War, a freight train carrying Union troops derailed in the valley below the square. Nothing much remains of the wreck but the field where they buried the 53 dead. That same July 4th, 1870, Bell Hollow held its first parade. They marched the main street from City Hall to the cemetery, saluted the graves, and came home to fireworks above the ravine. Supposedly, the air shimmered red, white, and blue on its own, and someone said, "The boys march still." Half the town still believes that. The other half likes pretending to. Each year, the lineup never changes. The school band in front, then the veterans, the mayor's classic car, the volunteer fire truck, and the closing float carrying the Patriots. Locals in gray-blue uniforms painted to look like the original regiment. Except every photograph I've ever cataloged for the Historical Society shows the same faces decade after decade. Same boy with a drum just a bit too big for him, same woman in white with sunken eyes. Names change in print, but somehow not in the pictures. It's a quirk I used to list under regional peculiarities for my classes, like how every county fair claims the first Ferris wheel. Now that I'm parade marshal, I have to keep the old formation or risk a riot of tradition. When I suggested adding a float for healthcare workers, the mayor coughed politely and said, "We honor all service, Mr. Cole, but not everyone gets to march." He handed me the official ledger, a cracked-spined binder older than anyone still alive, filled with handwritten names and a note at the top of every year. Do not alter the order under any circumstance. The ink looked black until the light hit it, then brown, almost rust. I laughed, asked who kept traditions so tight in an age that can't remember passwords. The mayor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ask the band, they know who's keeping time. That night, as I passed the practice field, the drummers were still tapping past curfew, a rhythm slow and perfect, older than any of them could play. By July 3rd, the town had transformed into its yearly postcard. Bunting tangled around lampposts, kids smearing popsicle dye across their faces, the air heavy with frying oil and borrowed patriotism. My students had volunteered to help with float construction, half from enthusiasm, half for extra credit. They painted cardboard fireworks and glued glitter to plywood eagles while the radio looped marching tunes that seemed to speed up every few minutes. Bell Hollow doesn't change much, but this year the mayor had handed control of creative direction to me. "Modernize carefully," he'd said, tapping the ledger on his desk. Carefully means leave the order alone. At first it sounded harmless, then the townspeople showed how sacred routine really was. A newcomer family from Cleveland offered to sponsor a unity float with rainbow streamers and multicultural flags. The hardware store owner shut their donation check inside the register drawer and never brought it out. "Parade stays true," he grunted. When I suggested moving the veterans forward in the lineup, better photo opportunity, clearer traffic flow, every planning committee member stared at me as if I'd blasphemed. Hank Dorset, the 89-year-old standard bearer who hadn't walked without a cane in 10 years, pounded the table. "They follow the roll," he said, "not us. We read, they march." He passed me that same cracked ledger I'd glimpsed in the mayor's office. Half the pages were paper thin, name columns stretching back to the 19th century, the ink running together as if it still refused to dry. Next to a few names were symbols, small red stars fading to brown. "Marked ones lead the step," Hank whispered. "Call them right. They listen for their names." I tried to laugh it off. Ghost parade etiquette, huh? No one laughed with me. Outside the VFW hall, a group of teenagers tuned their drums. The rhythm drifted through the open window. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. But underneath, a deeper cadence thumped, too steady to belong to any human drummer. For the first time, I wondered what exactly Bell Hollow celebrated every year, and who insisted on cheering. That night, I couldn't sleep. Firecrackers and cicadas blended into one relentless pulse, a heartbeat the whole town seemed to share. Around midnight, I gave up, grabbed my keys, and drove downtown to check the last float storage. Responsibility, I told myself. Curiosity whispered something truer. Main Street lay empty under sodium lamps. Paper flags fluttered in perfect rhythm, as though a silent metronome kept time. When I cut the engine, the faint tap of drums reached my ears. Steady, distant, too precise to belong to fireworks. Someone was rehearsing. I smiled at the thought of overeager students until I realized the direction. Not from the school field, from the cemetery. I walked, drawn by habit, shoes echoing against storefronts that answered with smaller, faster echoes, as if footsteps followed a step behind. At the intersection by the memorial, the air thickened. I suddenly smelled wet clay. The drumming stopped. A man's voice, quiet, formal, spoke my name from somewhere inside the fog. "Mr. Cole, roll call, sir." I turned full circle, street empty, sky bruising before dawn. Then the drumming began again, measured and patient, moving down Main Street toward the river. When I looked, nothing moved, just flags dipping slightly, like invisible shoulders passing beneath them. The sound curved toward the cemetery gates and stopped. I fled back to my truck, promising myself, again, that the mind loves tricks. But when I drove away, headlights caught boot prints across the asphalt, distinct and wet, pressed in clay that shouldn't exist on pavement. They led straight to the graveyard fence and simply ended mid-stride, as if the marchers had stepped into air. Sunrise found me parked outside the cemetery gates, hands still locked to the steering wheel. Logic should have dragged me home hours ago, but something about that abrupt trail of footprints begged confirmation. I told myself I'd film evidence, send it to the mayor, ruin the town's ghost story once and for all. The iron gates creaked open at my touch. Inside, morning fog sat belly deep between marble headstones. Flags from Memorial Day fluttered listlessly. Dew haloed the bronze soldier that capped the central monument. At first, I saw only emptiness. Then, movement shimmered between the graves. Figures flickering like heat above asphalt, outlines forming and falling away. The first one to step forward wore a Union blouse and a torn kepi. His face was all the colors of old photographs, brittle paper flesh, eyes washed pale blue. He saluted me. Others joined, miners with soot still clinging under nails, women in apron dresses, a child clutching a flag so heavy it dragged the ground. Hundreds lined up in silence facing Main Street, waiting for the signal to march. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The soldier nearest me tilted his head. His name patch read Captain E. Cole. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The grave behind his boots bore the same name, Evan Cole, born 1987, died 20. The last digits half chiseled, as if the stone expected an update. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I stumbled backward over roots, camera swinging uselessly. The crowd moved in unison, boots settling into formation. Somewhere in the fog, a drumline began, muffled and perfect. They weren't rehearsing. They were responding. I ran, tearing through mist toward the road, the sound following. steady, tireless. At the gate, I dared one glance back. In that gray distance, the child with the dragging flag raised his arm, holding the fabric aloft. An entire rank behind him mirrored the gesture. Then, all at once, as though a conductor had cut the music, they froze. Quiet, absolute. In the moment before sunlight broke over the hill, I thought I saw the faintest smile on the captain's paper lips. When I finally collapsed into the truck, dawn light spilled across the dashboard, harsh and new. In the mirror, my own reflection wore a smear of clay across the cheek, identical to the soil clinging to the graves I'd just fled. I didn't teach summer school that morning. I parked outside Hank Dorsett's barbershop instead, hair still damp with panic sweat. Hank was already sitting on the porch, coffee steaming between his gnarled hands, eyes red as rust. He didn't act surprised to see me. "You went to watch them," he said, like he'd been timing the confession. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out brittle. "You mean the band?" "The dead," he rasped. "Every town's got its saints. Ours just kept marching after they died." He patted the bench beside him. The wood was warm from the rising sun. "Bell Hollow's built on that battlefield you teach about. The first miners uncovered bones when they dug the foundations. We reburied them proper. Didn't matter." He nodded east, toward the cemetery ridge. "They rise once a year. Same time, same route, finishing the parade they never got to start. As long as the living lead the line, they stop at the graves and go quiet again." "And if nobody leads," I asked, "then everyone joins." He said it simply, like he was naming the weather. "For 3 generations we've kept the order. Roll call first, veterans second, patriots last. Keeps the count steady." He rubbed his knee, scar tissue ridged under thin skin. "I was marshal once. You call their names wrong, boy, and the hollow hums." I told him I didn't believe in curses. He handed me a paper cup instead of an argument. "Don't matter what you believe, just don't change what works." When I left, the 4th of July banners along Main Street were already snapping in a wind that hadn't touched my skin. The rhythm of their flapping, 3 short, 1 long, matched the cadence from last night's drums. It followed me all the way home. By afternoon, reason had rearmed itself. A rational brain fills silence with rules, even if it has to invent them. I told myself Hank was senile, that I'd been sleep-deprived, that the human mind can produce entire battalions out of fog and fear. And I told myself one more thing. If tradition demanded absolute obedience, it was because nobody had ever tested it. So I did. At the planning meeting that evening, I unfolded the lineup sheets and began reorganizing them like a battlefield diagram. "Modern optics," I said brightly. "We'll start with the community chorus, then health services, then veterans. Equal footing, just updated flow." The committee sat frozen. Mayor Schultz's jaw moved, once, like he was chewing air. "Mr. Cole," he finally said, "please don't play organizer with sacred matters." "Sacred?" I laughed. "It's a parade, not communion." The room exhaled in one slow, collective hiss. Outside, thunder rolled across cloudless sky. Hank Dorset whispered a prayer that sounded like someone reciting serial numbers. When we adjourned, not one person met my eyes. I took the silence as submission. That night, I drafted press releases about new beginnings and progressive civic pride. I imagined headlines, "Bell Hollow celebrates a new chapter." I poured whiskey, bold music humming from my laptop speakers. For the first time in days, I convinced myself I'd wrestled the town's superstition into the present century. Then a window slammed upstairs. The flags I'd hung on the porch twisted around themselves until all that showed was red. I told myself it was wind, though no leaves stirred. From the distance came a single drumbeat. Not a roll, not a rhythm, just one colossal thud echoing off every wall of the hollow. My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "The roll will be corrected." I deleted it, laughed too hard, poured another glass. But each sip tasted like mud, and somewhere in the backyard, the cicadas had switched to the same 3 short, 1 long pattern, calling cadence in the dark just for me. July 3rd should have smelled like sparklers and grilled corn. Instead, Bell Hollow reeked of ozone and wet iron. Throughout the day, clouds formed bright bruises in a spotless sky, pulsing but never bursting. Shopkeepers taped flags over their windows the way Southerners tape windows before hurricanes. By dusk, Main Street had gone strangely quiet. The carnival lights flickered, radios stuttered mid-anthem, switching between static and marches that I didn't recognize. I half expected the mayor to cancel the parade.
No one said a thing. At home, porch lights glowed red through the fog beginning to creep up from the valley. I sat at my desk drafting the opening remarks I'd deliver tomorrow, a dedication to progress, inclusion, a celebration of every hand that built this town. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Each time I reached the word march, the font changed itself to italics, then to bold. Then the word duplicated silently down the screen until my whole speech just read, march, 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 march. I shut the laptop, heart hammering. Outside, the street lamps flicked off one by one down Main Street, darkness rippling toward my house until only my porch bulb burned. Wind pressed against the windows, yet left the curtains perfectly still. Sleep came in spasms. Somewhere between dreams, I heard a parade passing through the edge of consciousness. Drums close, brass muted by distance. The rhythm crawled into my pulse, synchronized. When I woke, mud streaked my sheets. Boot-shaped prints arced from the doorway to the window. In the glass's reflection, I caught a silhouette dressed in Union blue, hand raised in half salute. Then lightning tore the image apart, showing nothing outside but fog. My phone buzzed again. Roll call in 1 hour. 4 a.m. glowed on the screen. No sender. I told myself I was only going to watch, prove a point, maybe grab a stray student skipping curfew. Anything but admit that some part of me already knew the drummers would be there. Fog had rolled in thick enough to taste. It clung to the clapboard storefronts like breath on glass. Main Street's bunting hung limp, the colors drained to shades of film gray under the street lamps. My watch blinked 3:59, then 4 o'clock after skipping the turning second. No sound, no wind. Then the first tap. A single stroke on a snare, dull and certain. Another followed, then a row of them, forming the slow, deliberate rhythm I'd heard every night that week. 3 short, 1 long. I stepped into the street just as the fog ahead condensed into movement. Figures emerged in columns, uniforms from every century, cavalry coats, miners' coveralls, nurses' whites stiff with invisible starch. They marched perfectly in step, bearing flags and bayonets and banners so old the fabric should have disintegrated. Their faces were colorless, defined only by the glint of moisture where eyes should be. One rank of drummers lifted sticks carved from bone, striking instruments that looked more vein than wood. The world's quiet collapsed beneath the first roll. The parade passed straight through me, not metaphorically, through. Cold pressure, then weightless drowning. I couldn't scream. For an instant, I saw myself marching beside them, expression blank, jaw working in time with the rhythm. Behind me, the fog folded back inward. At the head of the procession, the captain raised his saber toward the courthouse and shouted a single word that I could not hear but felt surge through my ribs. Every window rattled. Lights went out as the columns turned down the final block leading to the cemetery. I stumbled after, desperate to photograph, record, bear witness, whatever historians do when history swings its jaw open. But by the time I reached the gates, the fog had already swallowed the last shadow. Within it echoed one faint, familiar voice, my own, shouting roll call. I didn't remember speaking. My throat ached as if I had. By full dawn, I was swearing at my steering wheel, headlights still cutting cones through the fog that refused to burn off. Behind me, the town slept as peacefully as if nothing had ever stirred. Not a single siren, not a dog bark, just that new silence that sits heavy after noise. I told myself I'd drive to the next county, find cell service, call someone sane.
Main Street funneled me onto the highway, but 2 miles out I saw the orange flash of road flares. A deputy's car idled sideways across the lane, lights dead, door wide. No officer. No footprints in the damp. When I reversed, the fog behind had thickened into a wall of milk. I chose the side road instead, the one that threads through farm hills out past the quarry. After 15 minutes, the same gas station appeared again, same blinking, closed for holiday, swaying gently in the wind. Its flag wrapped tight around the pole, hung there too still, like frozen mid-salute. I circled once, then again, realizing the stations on both sides of the road were identical down to the sandwich board chalk writing, 4 a.m. Rehearsal success, see you at noon. My watch said 6:15. The sun sat low but immovable, light flattened to brass. Every attempt to drive forward looped me back toward that same pump island. Even the radio betrayed me, every station broadcasting only the faint roll of drums distorted into static. By 7 a.m., I abandoned the truck and walked, reasoning fog couldn't trick a compass. It did. Each ridge dropped me closer to town until the skyline of Bell Hollow rose again like a patient I'd already buried. Main Street glistened wet, bunting restored and crisp. A banner stretched over the road. Welcome to the 153rd Walk of Patriots, Marshal E. Cole. When I rubbed my eyes, the lettering stayed. Somewhere a single snare ticked a countdown, steady as a clock. Bell Hollow wouldn't let its marshal leave before the parade. By noon, the fog had melted into radiant summer air, bright enough to blind. Bell Hollow looked fixed in a glossy postcard, kids waving flags, vendors hawking lemonade, brass section warming up. The smell of charcoal and sugar coated everything, masking the graveyard stink still sealed in my throat. I stumbled through the crowd searching for someone who'd remember last night, but every face was newly cheerful, like a stage audience waiting for cue. When I asked one of my students if they'd heard the 4 a.m. practice, she blinked as if I'd told a bad joke. "Sir, that's just legend. You feeling okay?" At 12 precisely, the drumbeat started again. Crisp, perfect, and the crowd erupted in applause. The local news van rolled beside the first float, cameras humming. Music blared from the speakers, garish and proud. The marchers paraded down Main Street. But these marchers weren't the volunteers I'd signed up. They wore uniforms mottled with rust, faces uncovered and too pale for July. Every step rang hollow against the asphalt. People waved back, unbothered, clapping to a rhythm they shouldn't be able to hear. My stomach turned when I recognized Mom's old neighbor tossing candies from the veterans float. He'd died the prior winter. His smile never reached his eyes. No one noticed the sun had frozen at a perfect apex above Town Hall, holding still while the parade looped the square again and again. The hour hand on my watch quivered but would not move. Behind the main float marched a phalanx of faces I remembered from grave photographs in the school archives. The same boy drummer from 1921, the same widow in her yellow dress, all perfectly preserved, moving with mechanical grace. Between them, marching, baton lifted, was me. Not altogether me, but close enough. Uniformed, expressionless, leading the cadence. I shoved through spectators, waving my arms in front of their cheering faces, screaming that those weren't actors, they were duplicates. Nobody blinked. Laughter swelled to cover my voice. On the FET stand, Mayor Schultz clapped with razor-thin precision, mouthing the count under his breath. The parade music climbed, then reset. Identical notes, perfect restart. I realized they weren't circling for show. They were rehearsing eternity. And every living person on Main Street had already synced to the beat. I was the only one still missing time. Tradition said the parade looped once around Town Hall and finished at the cemetery gates for the noon salute. Every year I'd watched that bend. Every year it ended the same. But now, as the last float passed the library, the line didn't slow. They marched straight through the intersection, wrong direction. boots slapping in unison toward my vantage point at the reviewing stand. The crowd didn't seem to notice. They shifted with uncanny precision, stands pivoting just enough to keep clapping in time. I fought upstream through the human tide, choking on perfume and charcoal smoke. Every cheer hit the same pitch, same breath length, like one vast inhale. When the drumline reached the square, thunder cracked overhead, though the sky still shone flawless blue. At the front walked Hank Dorset, face gray as parchment, blood trickling neatly from each ear. He carried his flagpole like a crutch, mouth moving soundlessly. As he passed, the other's boots faltered half a beat, waiting until he turned his clouded eyes toward me. "Fix what you changed," he croaked. The words didn't reach my ears, they lived inside my head. Orders wrong, counts wrong. I stumbled forward, waving my arms at Mayor Schultz on the platform. He smiled back, vacant, clapping in time with everyone else. The television cameras remained locked on the procession. Faces blurred, colors oversaturated, until each marcher looked made of smoke. "Make them stop," I shouted, voice swallowed by brass and drums. The marchers adjusted as one, pivoting their column precisely 90 degrees to face me. The music followed, rhythm quickening into a pulse that seemed to drill straight into my chest. Every beat robbed half a breath, every cymbal crash erased another second of doubt. A new page fluttered loose from the ledger on the stand beside me, my own handwriting scrawled across its header, Marshal E. Cole, roll complete. The boy drummer tipped his head, waiting for my baton, and I realized I held something in my hand, though I'd never picked it up, a polished rod carved from bone. When the next downbeat fell, my arm rose automatically, guiding them forward. The street tilted, or maybe the world did. Every passerby froze mid-cheer, arms lifted in patriotic salute, while that impossible sun stayed nailed to its zenith. The marchers waited for me to move the baton. My muscles obeyed before my courage could object. One sweep downward, the drums erupted. Their boots cracked in perfect meter, splitting the asphalt like blistered skin. Beneath the noise, I heard the groan of the town itself, framing studs and buried pipes shifting deeper, aligning. Each beat tightened the wheeling circle until the parade folded back on itself, two columns converging before the courthouse. The front ranks faded as they crossed paths. Uniforms and flesh turned to light, leaving silhouettes scorched into the pavement like overexposed photographs. Hank Dorset limped toward me through the dissolving ranks. "You brought the count back to even," he said, voice faint under the thunder of snare rolls. "Cycle's over when the list fills." "What list?" I tried to shout. He pressed something into my palm. The cracked ledger, but new ink bled across the final line while I watched. Marshal Evan Cole, 153rd roll completed. I looked up. Every member of the procession was gone now except for the boy drummer. He raised his hand in salute, then twisted his drum toward me. Inside the skin stretched over it, I saw my own face floating just beneath the surface. The baton fell from my hand. The boy smiled. "Formation maintained," he whispered, then folded into smoke. Only wind remained, and rows of flags whipping double time, though no air stirred. The percussion didn't stop, it slowed, moved inward. My own heartbeat kept time where the drums left off. When I stumbled forward, invisible boots fell beside mine. On the courthouse flagpole, the stars and stripes shimmered translucent. Every existing hue drained to pale ashes. The world smelled of gunpowder and old brass. I felt the ledger in my pocket, heating like coal. Pages turned on their own until the binding cracked apart. The fragments lifted into the air, spiraling upward in a blizzard of names. Each name sparked once, snuffed out, leaving only the smell of burnt paper. When the last one vanished, silence returned, complete and heavy. Somewhere behind me, children started cheering again. The parade music replayed from speakers that no longer had power. And in the mirrored doors of the courthouse, a new reflection formed. Me, uniformed, eyes hollow, baton poised for another downbeat I hadn't yet given. History, looping, waiting for its next 4th to breathe again. Evening settled over Bell Hollow with the softness of falling ash. Families returned to their porches carrying folding chairs, coolers, leftover burgers charred in perfect circles. Every motion felt practiced, line read. For all appearances, July 4th had succeeded again. News crews roamed Main Street filming smiles. Their coverage showed fireworks streaking above the courthouse, but I knew no one had lit them. They screamed upward in silence, bursting white instead of color, and the smoke they left behind spelled faint words before the wind took them. Roll complete. I drifted among the crowd unnoticed. Children ran around me, sparklers hissing. Each spark winked out the instant it passed my sleeve. When I called out to the mayor, my voice didn't move the air. He toasted me with his lemonade, eyes empty, grin fixed. Back home, I found the front page already lying on my porch, still damp with fresh ink. The headline read, "Local Teacher Keeps Tradition Alive. Parade Highest Attendance on Record." Below, my smiling photograph. They'd chosen one from the school yearbook. The caption listed me as Marshal Evan Cole, Commander of Procession. No mention of my resignation or that I'd never given them any quote. Beside the photo, a column by Hank Dorset. He finally joined the parade. The rhythm continues. Hank's name appeared in the obituaries on the opposite page. The following morning, Main Street looked untouched by celebration. No confetti, no trash, not a footprint in the dust. The bunting still hung, bright as ever, but when I drove past the school, the wall clocks all read 4 a.m. sharp. Inside, somewhere, a single snare tapped once every 3 seconds, waiting for accompaniment. At the cemetery gate, new flags glistened in the dew. Fresh soil mounded beside a stone recently etched, Evan Cole, born 1987, died 2024, Marshal of the 153rd Parade. From the corner of my eye, soldiers stood in readiness, faces pale, eyes polite. They saluted when I turned to leave. For the first time, I saluted back. Duty has its gravity. Once you fall into its orbit, you don't climb out. Some nights, if you drive through the hollow when fireworks bloom across the horizon, you can still hear us tuning up. The faint roll of drums woven beneath the anthem, the hush just before the downbeat. That's the rehearsal starting again. It never really stops. It just waits for the living to keep time. If you ever wake before sunrise on the 4th and hear drums from a parade that hasn't begun, close your window. Don't peek between the curtains. Some towns celebrate because they love their freedom. Bell Hollow celebrates because it must remember its dead, until someone new takes the baton.